The Federal and Francis Xavier Engineering College jointly present the Nellai Marathon 2024. This event is powered by Little Flower Public School and NIMS Hospital, Tirunelveli. Run for Health on Sunday, December 29. Entry is free and all are welcome.
In contrast to what we had seen in all state elections since 2014, where was Mr. Modi in the campaigns? We don't want the Prime Minister overshadowing the campaigns. It's now very clear that the Election Commission is complicit in changing the lists of voters, impoverishment of those who were somewhat middle class, means that you need these freebies even more. You make people poorer, they need you more.
Right.
They will need your welfare schemes more, and they will give their vote more.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching Off the Beaten Track. This is likely going to be the last episode of the year. So what do we talk about but the year that has just gone by, 2024? It started in India with a big bang, the inaugural of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya. It reminded me of what had happened 40 years ago. As a very young reporter, we learnt about the plans of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad to launch an agitation for a Ram temple in Ayodhya by removing what was then called as the Babri Masjid. That is how the movement started. And over the last 4 decades, it actually catapulted the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Sangh Parivar into the center stage of Indian politics. At that time, it was a very peripheral party. The RSS did not have very much influence also on the Indian mind. But today it is there everywhere. It is actually dominating India's mind. In virtually every crevice of Indian society do we find the all-permeating idea of Hindutva right there across everywhere. So we'll be talking about that. This event was followed by the Lok Sabha elections, the preparations for that. The campaign was started. When the campaign started, it initially over that the campaign is over. The results have already been announced before the elections also. That is, Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, declared that this time his party, the BJP, is going to individually cross 300 and the entire alliance, 350, let me correct myself, and the alliance is going to cross 400. 400 par. That is the slogan which he used. But then somewhere during the campaign, things didn't seem very right for the BJP because Mr. Modi reverted to the tried and tested formula of communal polarization. The results came on the 4th of June, an epochal day because after 10 years, the BJP slipped down below a majority of its own. Eventually came down to 240. But by the end of the year, it appears that the BJP is on some kind of a recovery path. They won elections in Maharashtra and earlier than that in Haryana. Both states where the opposition had a winning chance. We will talk about all these things and who else do we turn to? Somebody who has also for the last 4 decades kept a very close look on the rise of Hindu majoritarian politics in India, Christophe Jaffrelot. Welcome to the program, Christophe. It's really a pleasure to speak to you all the time, very regularly. Let me start. We spoke to you earlier this year, right in January, just a few days after the Ram Temple was inaugurated. I was looking at our interview then, and you had said, rightly so, inauguration of the temple effectively launches BJP's election campaign. Then you said, people voting for BJP are, in spite of everything, joblessness, rise of poverty, and inequality. Recent CSDA surveys established that the main issue is the creation of Hindu Rashtra. I will take a pause here and ask you something based on these 3 points. Eventually, as the verdict shows us, that the temple was not the central issue in the elections. Joblessness, rise of poverty, and inequality in some way figured in the thinking of the voters also. The CSDS survey, closer to the polling, actually established that. How did this change? The first thing which I would want you to tackle is that why, despite such a build-up, the temple, Ram temple, did not become the issue number one on which people in jubilation went and pressed the EVM buttons. Why did this not happen? And secondly, how did all these bread and butter issues become important once again?
Yeah.
I just want to understand from you with your deep analytical skills.
Thank you, Nilanjan. This is indeed a very interesting question because retrospectively, we may look at 2024 as the landmark, the milestone, the point of inflection, the culminating point of a movement that, as you said, was 4 decades old. And in fact, my first trip to India in 1984 was precisely dominated by the launch of this Ayodhya movement.
Yes.
A committing point in many senses, of course, because the temple at last was inaugurated after decades of, so much
Agitation.
battles on every front. The
Yes.
demolition of the Babri Masjid, so many courts rulings, and finally Narendra Modi appearing as the high priest of Hinduism. This is why I find this image of January 2024 a kind of climax of a trend. Who would have imagined that in a country that claimed to be secular, the prime minister could act as the high priest of rituals, which should have been accomplished by proper Shankaracharyas who protested, saying this is not the right way to do things. But when we say culminating points, precisely, we also mean that, well, what next? And I think that, in fact, BJP could not capitalize so much on this achievement because they had arrived. It had been done. It had been achieved. So there was no need to mobilize energy on this front anymore. And very paradoxically, I think that it prepared the ground for other issues to come up. And these other issues, interestingly, were articulated by the opposition. And the opposition, in the first place, was more united than ever before, really. In the history of India, you have to go back to Janata Party phase for seeing the opposition joining hands to that extent, but had ideas. And the manifestos of many of these parties, including Congress, Samajwadi Party, AAP, were socio-economic oriented. It was more on, as you said, bread and butter, with one important key emphasis on joblessness, and another one, but correlated to that, on the caste census. And as you know, I consider that over the last now 40 years, Indian politics is oscillating between 2 poles. You have the Hindutva politics, and you have the caste politics.
Caste politics.
Exactly. So we've seen this oscillation. You have Mandir, you have Mandal, you have Mandal 1, you have Mandal 2, and I think what we saw with this election campaign is the pendulum returning towards the caste repertoire. The caste census is a demand that is here to stay. It will be very difficult not to have it in more than one state, Bihar, the only one that has done it so far. And the more the caste repertoire will be back, the less Hindutva would be meaningful. But of course, this is the only antidote BJP has at its disposal for resisting caste and class politics. So we are back to this tension, but with socioeconomic issues, caste politics staging a comeback. It does not mean that it will result in, at last, social reforms, but at least it can help many groups, plebeians, OBCs in particular, to join hands and support an alternative force. So yes, to respond to your question, Nilanjan, I would say this these two things. Yes, it was the end of the road for the Ayodhya movement in many ways. Two, it may have opened a new chapter on caste-based politics agendas.
Now, when you talk about the caste census being a very central issue, there was another issue which was actually picked up in a very major way by the opposition parties, and in fact, even now it is being pursued by Rahul Gandhi specifically more than any other political leader. That is the issue of the constitution. We also, in the last few days, we also seen a very unruly parliament session, which nonetheless on both the house spent 2 days each discussing the constitution to mark the 75 years of the constitution being in after existence after its adoption on 26th of November 1949. Although this debate was not conducted in November, but it was during the winter session, it was done. So constitution and caste. Now we are also talking about this has happened at a time when the BJP has staged an electoral comeback in Haryana and Maharashtra. Looking forward, do you think constitution, the threat to the constitution, and the demand for caste census, which is being raised consistently by again Rahul Gandhi, do you think this is going to resonate over time and give the Congress electoral benefits?
Well, it depends where we are looking. Definitely among Dalits, that was an issue. And this idea that BJP wanted a majority of 40 seats plus was interpreted as, well, they want to reform the constitution. And this constitution has given us rights, and they may try to, deprive us on these rights. And there is also a very emotional dimension there, a sentimental attachment to the constitution among Dalits, because this is the brainchild of Dr. Ambedkar, and we see today how important this sentimental dimension is also. The constitution was already there in London during the Shine Bag mobilization. So we've seen this as early as 2019, the need for the minorities, and not only for the Dalits, to defend the constitution. So these are the two groups for which definitely it matters, because what is enshrined in this is, of course, absolutely existential for them. Beyond that, I'm not so sure people are prepared to die for the constitution, really. It's definitely for other groups less important compared to joblessness, for instance, that is such a huge problem for the urban youth of all milieus. And the more educated you are, the more jobless you are as well. So it has become really an issue also for the middle class. And the middle class, incidentally, the middle class, I don't know whether you wanted to address this issue as well at that point, but I think the middle class has been more and more punished by the government in fiscal terms, in particular. and therefore even the middle class will now think in terms of, well, what is there for me socioeconomically? We will see more of, okay, identity politics is fine, but when will this government deliver?
Right. That is the problem. Middle class, definitely, but so far the middle class is discomfited, but they are not moving away very sizable numbers away from the BJP. That's something which we have all noticed. I'm sure that you have also noticed. Now, you were talking about the Dalits. Just one day ago, I was actually participating in one of the discussions over the television YouTube channels which was there, and there were people who was like critical of the Sangh Parivar, like people like me. There was side, and there was another colleague who's also part of the similar kind of thinking, not exactly the same as I would be thinking, and there were people from the right wing also. So they made a point. The discussion was essentially on Ambedkar, the BJP's play of Ambedkar, the embrace of Ambedkar. So they made a point that in the last 10 years, the BJP has made tremendous inroads into the Dalit community, and that during the Lok Sabha elections, some numbers of Dalit had gone away from the BJP. But as the Maharashtra results, and prior to that, the Haryana results show that the Dalits have come back to the BJP fold. Now, do you think that this is a correct claim? And if so, then what are the reasons that you think that some sections of Dalits have gone back to the BJP after having voted, for other parties besides the BJP?
The key word in your question, Nilanjan, is some sections.
Yes,
because we tend to look at Dalits as a block. We tend to look at the Dalit vote as homogeneous, and it's not. In fact, in most of the states, you have what I call a dominant Dalit Jati. Jatavs in UP, Mahars in Maharashtra, groups which have regrouped behind some political forces, BSP for the Jatavs over many decades, RPI factions for the Mahars over also many decades. And BJP has been very good at co-opting non-dominant Dalit Jati leaders.
That's right.
who were very pissed off, who were very resentful of the way these dominant Jati, Dalit Jatis cornered reservations, got access to so many positions in the government, in the bureaucracy. And therefore, you could certainly explain the success of BJP among reserved seats, among in constituencies reserved to SCs on that basis, which is reconfirmed by the fact that, for instance, in Maharashtra, there is no Mahar in the new government.
Right.
No, this is so revealing. So polarization works also at that level. Now, it does not mean that there are other factors. There is no doubt that Sanskritization remains an important phenomenon, that to be Hindu means something new for many of these elite groups, especially those who are dominated by others and who have not converted to Buddhism. So for the Valmikis, for the in UP, for the monks or Shambhars in Maharashtra, to be on the Hindutva side is also a sense, gives them also a sense of
pride.
Yeah, self-esteem, and I think both these are the two sides of the same coin. You gain politically and economically by supporting BJP. You gain also in terms of status and recognition.
But status and recognition, but still at the village levels, I do not know that whether to what extent we have studied that the divide still exists. I'll move on to another very important aspect of Indian politics, which is within the Sangh Parivar. Now, for the first time in the last several years, in fact, definitely not after 2004, this has not happened, that the RSS was not behind the BJP the whole hog. Right through the campaign, we started hearing these whispers that people from the RSS are not turning out to campaign for the BJP. I myself noticed because in our home, which is adjacent to New Delhi, part of Uttar Pradesh, the Ghaziabad, a very Hindutva dominated constituency. Over the last few years, we had people from the RSS coming to campaign for the 2019 elections, for the assembly elections in 2022, for the Ram Temple, to collect funds in 2021, to distribute the Akshat in January 2022. But they did not come in April or May to our home. Then we started checking. I personally started checking with various friends across India that are they getting similar reports? Yes, they were also getting. So very, with a lot of hesitation after consulting several friends within the profession, I wrote an article that is the campaign of the BJP beginning to stagnate. Just then the article appeared, just a few days here and there. Mr. Modi made that very provocative speech in Banswara in which he said that the Congress is going to steal the wealth of all of you and distribute it among those people who have more children. It reminded me of what you also know, that famous speech in 2002 in Becharji, that I am doing good for the people, but they say that I am not good for the people because I am improving temples. What do they want me to do? This is exactly what he said. What do they want me to do? To run these baby producing factories, referring to the riot relief camps in which the Muslims were there. So Mr. Modi went into this hyper communal polarization, the favorite narrative that he has. The RSS still did not come out. Then Mr. Nadda made that very provocative statement that we are now competent. We do not have any need for the RSS. There was a time when we were weak. June the 4th, the result came out. Within 5 days, I think it was the 8th or 9th of June, that Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, in a public speech, he made very critical remarks without naming anybody, but anyone who had the slightest understanding of Indian politics, he knew who the target was, that it was very much the Prime Minister. People think that they are very great, all kinds of loftiness. That continued for a long period of time. There was a coordination committee meeting in Kerala, in Palghat. Mr. Nadda and their organization general secretary, he also went. And they reported to the RSS like the faithful old junior colleagues which they used to do always. The RSS came out, campaigned in Haryana and in Maharashtra, and the RSS showed to the BJP what its absence still means in electoral terms. In the last few days, once again, a few comments have been made by Mr. Mohan Bhagwat. He said people have high egos, they should not, it destroys. Ego destroys people. Again, not naming anybody, but your guess is as good as mine, that who is he thinking about or who is he pointing to. How exactly do you look at the internal dynamics within the Sangh Parivar between Mr. Modi and Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, given the fact that they have an association dating back to the early 70s, that Mr. Mohan Bhagwat's father was among the revered leaders of the RSS for Mr. Modi. In fact, his book, Jyoti Punj, has a chapter on Mr. Bhagwat's father.
Exactly. Well, the tensions are not new. These tensions at least crystallized and were for everyone to see in the 2007 election campaign in Gujarat. That was definitely a moment when RSS leaders from the organization, but also from the Bharatiya Kisan Sangh, from the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, including, of course, Praveen Togaria, came out and said, well, we are not supporting Narendra Modi this time. In 2007 elections were very important because, of course, he had won the 2002 elections in the wake of the pogrom, but that was a different game. It was after being back to normalcy, could he win again? So he took a big risk by not accommodating Sangh Parivar leaders. There were a lot of tensions. There were so many tensions. Arun Jaitley had to rush to the place trying to reconcile X and Y. Of course, Keshubhai Patel was already having his own battle within the BJP in Gujarat. What do I mean? I mean that as early as 2007, it was very clear that for RSS cadres, the style of Narendra Modi was not of their liking. The style that we saw so well in 2007, you may remember the Modi kurta, the masks, personality cult.
Yes.
And the keyword in your introduction, in your question, was ego. RSS is not a place where you cultivate egos. On the contrary, you're supposed to abolish your ego. You are supposed to merge with the organization. This is what Golwalkar used to say. We don't want angularities. Well, egos are exactly what you can consider as angularities because you don't merge in the organization. Now, of course, on the other hand, Modi delivered. He won in 2007. He won with the support of other techniques, not the RSS volunteers knocking at the door of each and every one, but social media. The holograms were also to be mobilized in the following elections, 2012. APCO Worldwide was already there as a PR company helping the vibrant Gujarat and Narendra Modi in person. So he had a parallel communication structure. He had his own personal pyramid. RSS had to fall in line, if the man can win elections without a full support from RSS could not lag behind, had to fall in line and to get as much as it could. And it could get a lot. It's not as if RSS did not get a lot from the Modi government. But the tensions were there to remain. What I find very interesting in the year, because we focus on 2024, is that, yes, for the Lok Sabha elections, it was very clear that the rift was, the gap was broadening. And as you said, Haryana elections, Maharashtra elections, RSS is back and support, and they win. Well, by the way, they win in very special circumstances, and we may return to that, but these may probably be the less free and fair elections we've ever seen in India. By the way, 2024 Lok Sabha elections were already the less free and fair elections we had ever seen in India. But still, they won. But in contrast to what we had seen in all state elections since 2014, where was Mr. Modi in the campaigns?
Absent.
So that may be the deal. If you don't want to expose yourself to defeat, quote unquote, defeat, the way you experience defeat in the Lok Sabha elections, you need us. And if you need us, we don't want the Prime Minister overshadowing the campaigns. We may have seen, this is why I say retrospectively 2024 may well be seen as a milestone. For the first time, after 10 years of each and every state election campaigns dominated by the PM, we've seen two very important states for them not having Narendra Modi as a chief campaigner.
Maybe the only other state, which was very early on in one election in Assam, after 2014, the first one where Mr. Modi did not actually campaign as aggressively as that. That is the only other addition. And Assam has been always one of the two states where the BJP has tolerated a state leadership of some standing. Rest everywhere, it is actually an anonymous kind of a state leadership. Barring Uttar Pradesh and Assam, we will have to see to what extent does Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, with the backing of RSS, now how does he articulate his position and does he mark out an independent position? That's something which we will see. And if anything happens, we will possibly try to get you back on this show to talk about it. But one question which emerges from what you said. Mr. Modi was absent in this campaign, Maharashtra and Haryana, yet the BJP won. So my question is, has the idea of Hindutva reached a threshold RSS feels that it does not require an individual to lead it and win an election?
Yeah.
Can it now solely sustain itself and win elections on the basis of the organization or the Sangathan and on the basis of the ideology or Vichardhara? Do these things insulate itself from the necessity of an individual like Mr. Modi?
No, this is a very important question. Let me first repeat that I think these elections were probably the less free and fair we ever saw at the state level.
Right.
It's now very clear that the Election Commission is complicit in changing the lists of voters,
Right.
letting muscle power, including by the police, intimidating the Muslim voters, and so on and so forth. The list of problems is now very long. And when you hear how...
If I may just add, yesterday, I think it was last Friday, that they have brought in a change by which the public, the people, cannot access or ask for all information about voting, about the data of voting, about the video footage of that cannot be asked. And the courts also cannot compel the Election Commission to make available this information to the people of India.
In which democracy do you see these things? Where else do you see the electoral procedure that has to be sacrosanct, that eroded, making suspicion the first reaction everybody has? Why are they making things so complicated for those who want some transparency? Right. And that with the blessing of the judiciary. So this is the caveat. But of course, the main question you ask is, let's assume that they've won. Right. Have they won because, well, now they don't need Narendra Modi for winning the elections because they have established their own hegemony? In fact, the question you ask is, do we have such an hegemonic Hindutva that even without him, it's bound to be the order of the day forever, or at least for a long time? Well, I would like to factor in here something else. The role some welfare schemes are playing in the election results these days.
Okay.
I think we have never seen such a direct relation between welfare schemes, freebies of all kinds, and the electoral outcome. Let's go back to the CSDS surveys that say, well, for those who have benefited from any kind of scheme, there are so many schemes, state government schemes, national schemes. The list is very long. Jan Dhan Yojana, Ujjwal Yojana, Swachh Bharat, and the name of the PM is often there, but
Yes.
sometimes you don't need even it, and his photograph sometimes. Sometimes you don't even need that. So when a voter has benefited from one of these schemes, the probability that he supports the government, the state government, because we are talking about state elections, is much higher. So we have entered a new era, a new form of clientelism. Clientelism used to be a local story.
Right.
Now it's a kind of state story and maybe national story. I give you this just before
And you give me a vote.
and you give me your vote. This is the deal.
Right.
Plus, and that's where the RSS stages a comeback. There is this funny idea that because it's digital, because it's direct benefit transfer, there is no human intervention between the government and the beneficiaries.
Right.
Far from that. Far from that. To benefit from these schemes, you need to fill forms. You need to have the form sent to the right person
Right.
at the right time. Who is doing this job?
That is the RSS.
And RSS people. So it's not only that the RSS, BJP, Shiv Sena, governments are giving you something and you have to in return give your vote, but it's also that the whole process is overdetermined by people who on the ground are doing a lot of daily work, and that's where the army of volunteers, the RSS has matters a lot. Last point. Why does it matter so much, these freebies? Why do they matter so much, these welfare schemes? Because the socio-economic situation of the people is worsening. The kind of K-shape post-COVID recovery we see means what? Well, there is an impoverishment of the lower middle class. By the way, nobody speaks about the neo-middle class anymore. No, there is no neo-middle class. Back to poverty has been the route for many of those who were the aspiring groups of the last decade.
Right.
So impoverishment of those who were somewhat middle class means that you need these freebies even more. When 800 million people benefit from the PDS system, you see that the polarization between the rich and the poor is increasing. And I would say it's a very Machiavellian plan. You make people poorer, they need you more.
Right.
They will need your welfare schemes more, and they will give their vote more. But that's not development. That's not development. It's not the way the country can develop, and in the first place,
right,
the way the country can create jobs. Because it's part of the whole story. You don't have jobs, you need freebies.
You need free food.
And free food, exactly, rations. That's why I mentioned
800 million people being given free food.
But can you see how counterproductive this is for the development of the country when everybody needs, in the first place, well, what NRGA gave, by the way, some job, making you on your feet, more and more autonomous. And NRGA saved from poverty dozens of billions of people.
During COVID.
Even during COVID.
Most important, yes.
And now, on the contrary, we see these schemes, in a way, cultivating poverty as one of the best ways for winning elections when, at the last minute, the government will put the nose over the water, above the water.
Right. What is your assessment as to what made Mr. J.P. Nadda make that statement to the media in an interview? Obviously, it's a statement which, in all probability, would have been made after due clearance of Mr. Modi. What made them actually say that we do not require the RSS? Was it some kind of an arrogance?
I think there is some kind of arrogance, the same arrogance we saw when they thought they would get 400 seats.
Mhm.
You know,
Modi's guarantee?
yes, as if now they had the formula, as if now, well, elections were just a formality. This is certainly a form of arrogance and a reflection of how cut off from realities they are. And this is where RSS would be very useful, because RSS has the ear on the ground, and they don't. It's also this idea that is the Vishwaguru, is hugged by all the powerful leaders of the world, and that's enough. It's enough for cultivating the popularity you need to win elections. But that was misplaced. This kind of trust or confidence was exaggerated.
One last question, looking ahead, we are at the moment seeing a phase of politics where once again people are looking for temples beneath mosques everywhere. Wherever people will say that if Christophe Jaffrelot comes to India, it says that he's staying in this circuit house. Beneath that, there is a temple. We will dig it up. The Archaeological Survey of India, a friend of mine, told me that it is no longer involved with restoration and maintenance. It is only involved with digging up. So archaeology has been reduced to being a digging organization. Go and dig up everything and excavate. Only excavate. Is this likely going to become the new phase? Everywhere, in every new city, a new Babri Masjid, a new Gyanvapi Masjid, a new Shahi, Eidgah to be demolished. We already have pending cases: Taj Mahal, Qutub Minar, Bhojshala in Madhya Pradesh, that mosque near Mangalore, and we can continue to talk and start preparing that list. It's going to be endless. So, will this entire threshold value of Hindutva, which I was talking about,
Well,
do
it
you
will,
expect it to be the dominating thing in the Indian people?
if it works. If it works at the time of elections, why should they not exploiting this vein? This strategy that they have initiated now 40 years ago. But there is some doubt on my mind on that.
Mhm.
There is certainly a fatigue with this kind of identity politics. By the way, the Ayodhya temple is not visited by as many people as they had
That's right.
anticipated.
The real estate expansion has collapsed. Companies which invested very heavily are not being
Yeah,
able to sell properties. The airlines are not being able to run the flights,
yeah,
diminish the flights. All these issues are there, but not being written about extensively in the Indian media.
definitely. So uh, I'm not so sure it will take them anywhere, and especially if socioeconomic issues are as they have started to be, yeah, gaining momentum again. So this is where the challenge lays for BJP. There is a moment when you can't fool the people and not give them bread and butter to return to your formula.
Right.
This is the trick, because I don't see the Indian economy doing well in 2025. The slowdown is there, and foreign investors are not coming. Make in India is a complete failure. After 10 years, the manufacturing sector has continued to decline. Never it has been so weak, never since the 70s. We've seen so few
Mhm.
people working in the manufacturing sector. And if you allow me, I would like to connect that to international affairs, because
Mhm.
2024 may also be retrospectively be the year when we have seen, in fact, an India-China rapprochement that is
Right.
overdetermined by economic considerations.
That's right.
The West has not invested the way Narendra Modi expected it would in the framework of the Make in India program. There is a need for job creation, industrialization. The Indian entrepreneurs are not doing it. In fact, they are parking their money abroad. They are not investing in the country itself. Who will do it? Who will industrialize India? There is only one candidate left, and that is China.
Yes.
And in a context when already China is inundating the Indian market with its own product.
Own products, yes.
The trade deficit, $128 billion, is largely made of this kind of products. So you claim that there is an agreement in the Himalayas. Game over. We can move forward. And in the economic survey of July, because there was one in June, July, you read, we need Chinese investments.
That's right.
We will never recover economically without China's investment. This is a new chapter that is opening. And therefore, you need to connect the economic crisis, domestic economic crisis, and the international dynamics, because the implications are huge. An India-China rapprochement makes the West, the US in the first place, very uncomfortable at a time when Donald Trump will become much more protectionist and will therefore alienate India as well. So 2025 will be a very interesting year on that front as well. And the connection between the domestic politics and the international affairs will have to be watched.
Very well explained, Professor Christophe Jaffrelot. We have actually done a fair review of 2024, which you said was some kind of a watershed year. Definitely in history, it will be looked at as a major important year. I will not give the most quoted label, of a turning point. We really do not know any turn or not. But yes, the 2024 Lok Sabha elections is definitely going to be indicative of the various possibilities which are there in Indian politics, in Indian electoral, narrative. You say that economic challenges and caste still remain the basic, issues which the opposition can focus on to stop the Hindutva narrative. Let us see whether it happens or not. What is going to happen? I'm sure that 2025 will be an equally important year. We could not, unfortunately, talk about where does the RSS go beyond 100 years. But for that, I will once again request you to come back on our show, and when we will be talking about
with pleasure
the RSS and maybe other things.
With pleasure.
Thank you very much, Professor Jaffrelot. It's always a delight to speak with you. Thank you so much.
The Federal and Francis Xavier Engineering College jointly present the LA Marathon 2024. This event is powered by Little Flower Public School and NIMS Hospital, Tirunelveli. Run for Health on Sunday, December 29. Entry is free and all are welcome.